happy to be here and be part of the first sort of virtual Women in Technology conference. So, congratulations to all the organizers. And my first question and my first sort of thought around being new to Philips, have just joined the company, and what have we been doing for the last month or two? To be honest, I think in my role, it's been extremely busy because truly Philips looks at responding to COVID from literally the triple duty of care. So when COVID hit us, like most companies, we probably didn't know the problem. We were watching from the sidelines to say, how will this evolve? But then I think quickly the company realized that our success will be determined by ability to how do we just reinvent, how do we collaborate, and how do we just get things done. So having said that, I think Philips has taken the approach to tackle the pandemic at three different levels because we look at our customer and their needs, business continuity, as well as our employees and their well-being. So what do I mean by customers and their needs? So for those of you who understand the Philips product and the industry that we operate in, we're a health technology company. So our customers are really healthcare professionals, people who are right in the midst of the battle and are really our COVID warriors. We have homemakers on the other side who are probably dealing with it in terms of choices they have to make, looking after their families. So how can we enable that? As well as new mothers. So we have the spectrum of customers. So when we say we want to continue to deliver this customer value despite disruption, so we've had amazing stories where we have Philips employees still showing up at the hospitals. So if you have an MRI machine or a CT scan machine that doesn't work, you need them today, even more than before. So we have people who continue to service these machines. We're trying new ways of doing this by actually talking to these health workers and saying, can we try doing this remote? Like, we'll guide you. Can you fix it at your own? We also actually have stories of some of our own COVID warriors, whether it's salespeople, whether it's people who help with actually installing a new machine in a hospital, traveling out to different cities amidst this lockdown. And I think from the personal health side, where Philips has an extremely wide range of products, because if you think of personal grooming, if you think of our kitchen appliances like air fryers, if you think of domestic appliances like the vacuum cleaners, we have a whole range of products. So I think Philips has really tried to engage socially with our customers. So we've run lots of very interesting sort of campaigns, and one being like the Trim at Home challenge, which I know even like Virat Kohli actually participated on behalf of Philips. Or similarly, we're doing a lot of educational webinars that are being led by doctors. So again, I think in summary, if you look at that triple duty of care, customers are right at the center of how we're trying to adapt to this pandemic. Then comes business continuity, like any other organization, any other industries. Given we have a lot of our factories, some of our factories are actually producing health equipment. So these are essential services. So our factories continue to operate with the right sort of social distancing and the right sort of return to work policies. So in terms of ensuring the transportation, the supply chain is not disrupted, the parts are still coming to us, whether it's being locally produced or whether we have supplies coming from different parts of the world, because we do have manufacturing capabilities set up here in the country that are servicing domestic as well as where we're manufacturing globally, but out of India. Similarly, I think when you think of business continuity, as I said, like our salespeople who service our hospitals, despite the lockdowns, despite the red zones, the orange zones, the green zones across the different countries, we had to literally demarcate and categorize critical and non-critical activities and accordingly guide them, train them, give them like the requisite PPEs to ensure that their safety is actually central. And as now we look at unlocking across the countries, Philips real estate strategies, we're completely return to work enabled. So looking at the risk, we have approximately 15 to, I would say, 30-40% of our workspaces ready for employees to come back. But I will talk a little bit about what we do to employees, but it's completely restricted to essential sort of work that where you require people to come back to work. So that's more on business continuity and customers. And I think for employees, I think the last 2 months have raised a lot of questions. can we work remotely, or what will happen to our employee development, or as a manager, can I hire again? Do we have the resources to work from home? Or how do I navigate this complexity? Will employee engagement levels go down? So lots and lots of questions. And I think in the last couple of months, the company has been able to navigate this pretty well. And there has been a lot that's been done, keeping the employee well-being at the center. So you start with safety, you start with policies, you start with a lot of sort of clarity from our leaders who probably dialed up the communication to take our employees along this journey and enable the basic infrastructure to get them to continue to work from home for a long period of time. Now, once we crossed that bridge, I think it was a little bit about, okay, the basic reaction of getting everybody productive. Once that was done, I think as a company, we started looking to say, what are some of our employee benefits that we need to introduce to tackle COVID? So for instance, specific insurance policies, we're evaluating home office setups. So we're actually looking at a lot of employee specific benefits related to COVID. At the same time, I think we've had this lovely opportunity of giving back to community. So I think Philips absolutely advocates that. So we have run campaigns encouraging employees to contribute to the PM Fund, to the West Bengal cyclone. We've actually created a lot of awareness programs by tying up with different NGOs. So just giving back to the community in this hour of need, I think, is critical. And then I think engagement has completely gone virtual. And I know I don't want to spend a lot of time just on that, but we've done lots of interesting things with learning, like virtual learning. We've done a lot of interesting things with how our leaders are owning up this engagement. So some fun stuff like hot seats and quizzes and showing our leaders in avatars that our employees haven't seen, like cleaning and cooking at home, or just having a consistent communication channel across all our leaders. And like most companies, we've gone completely virtual in terms of onboarding, but yet trying to keep that human connect. So we still onboarded all our summer interns that we hire across the different campuses, both engineering and the MBA campuses. But how do we make that still engaging for this community that's coming on board? So things like that. I also think Philips has done something really good around measuring employee sentiment. So while I think we're focusing on physical and mental well-being, so obviously employees have access to the employee assistant lines. We've done lots of, I would say, like trying to get them to do yoga, getting them to come together. But outside of that, just in terms of assessments, like we've given them some ergonomic self-assessment tools, giving them tips and telling them like, how do you kind of work from home? We've also used some AI tools, which I think is pretty cool, which is very personalized. It's like a chat box, and it just talks about employee well-being in terms of how are they coping with this whole work from home. And we've got some amazing, interesting sort of insights. And I think last but not least, given we think this will continue to exist, we have actually started putting a lot of thought to say, what does this mean for the future? Is this an opportunity to reimagine the workplace in terms of what roles would like to come to work? How do we kind of continue to collaborate? So lots and lots of, I think, interesting and really, really good work across that triple duty of care, which is customers, business continuity, as well as employees. So I think the first one is, once a very senior leader had told me that every time you take on a new role or you join a new company, what is it that guides you? And I think for me, the person told me, or that leader told me, is think about what is the legacy that you will leave behind. And I think that stayed on with me and it guides me as I probably have navigated my career. And the reason being, we all do different roles, we move to different organizations. There's always a lot of good work that's kind of done in the past, even before you get there. There will be different things that you do. But if you pay emphasis to what is that you would do, it could be a process, it could be a project, it could be the impact in terms of your role, anything that will live beyond your own tenure in that role, right? I mean, that's what I mean by sort of legacy, where people or the company will probably remember you for your contribution beyond the time that you were there. So that is something that absolutely drives me. Like, what is the legacy that I can leave behind in a role? I think the second advice that I have for a lot of people, especially the younger generation, is, and this is a very common saying to say that your career is a marathon and not a sprint. I truly, truly believe that. And I truly believe that is because I personally, I think, have practiced that by default. I don't think it was by design, but as an individual, I gravitate towards an experience or a skill set that I'm looking to acquire. So if I have to make a decision on role A versus role B, I probably will make it basis, okay, here is something I get to learn new, or here is something I don't know, or here is a skill that I will probably develop. So I'm kind of chasing experiences or learnings versus, I think, while it's okay, but for me personally, I would probably put that secondary in comparison to chasing just pure titles like, hey, I want that promotion, I want that next level. And don't get me wrong, I'm not, this is not me trying to tell people that you don't have to be ambitious and everybody wants to probably be at the top of the organization. It's not that. But I believe that if you have the right experiences and the skill sets, and if you're investing in that, and if you're making career choices around that, you ultimately will get to hopefully that right level or the right title. So it will follow versus choosing and chasing that singularly, that I only want that next promotion. So that's what's worked for me. And that probably would be something I could share here as well. What else? I think the third one is probably just the ability to take risks. And when I say risks, again, it's relative, right? For me, a risk could be something I do like this much versus for somebody, a risk maybe like in quantum this much. So it's relative. But as long as we're taking some calculated risks along a journey, and to give you like a personal example, for me, when I say what is a calculated risk, it could mean you're extremely familiar, you're extremely comfortable with something that you're doing. And if there's an opportunity that comes to you to say, hey, do you want to do this? Sometimes we're like, you know what, I'm good where I am. Or you might think, but I don't know much about that. Maybe I don't want to do that, or it's the unknown. And what I've realized is that sometimes it's good to actually do something or sign up for something that you're not familiar with or you're not comfortable with. And so it pushes you into a zone where you're probably unlearning as well as learning. And one of my favorite examples, at least for an HR professional, I can share that is I'd spent a lot of time doing a COE role, like a COE role in the HR parlance, like most people would know, is a specialized role. So I did a lot of rewards and performance. And there was this important juncture in my career where there was this opportunity to kind of branch out and get into slightly more general HR, which was more around change and more around core HR, BP, which I hadn't done up to that point of time. And if I think looking back in my career, if I didn't make that one role, I really don't think I would probably be head of HR today. And maybe I would still be happy, but I do think that trying something gave me a completely new skill set. And I think honestly has developed me into becoming this overall leader versus being just a specialist. And there's nothing wrong in choosing to continue to be a specialist, but today I feel like I knew and I could choose between those two. Similarly, another example, I mean, because I'm giving examples today, is just the ability to probably go to a different industry that you're not familiar with. It's not easy, it's not comforting, because when you spend time, especially in a function where like HR, where the functions probably are similar but the context is completely different when you go to a different industry. So I had that same feeling when I went from, say, a financial services organization to the internet ecosystem. Completely different. They were like, it was, I think, one of my biggest sort of unlearning moment. But looking back, I think it was an amazing decision because it just taught me to probably appreciate things in a completely different lens. So that's probably what I mean. It pays off sometimes to push beyond your comfort zone and take sometimes those risks, and not everything turns out okay. So those would probably be my top career lessons. This is my most favorite question, is what would you tell your younger self? And I know like this is a question that's asked very often. um, But honestly, being a mother of two children, I think many a times when I look at them and I'm like, okay, things are so different now. What would I do differently? Because the environment is so different today. But personally, I mean, responding to this specific question, what would I tell my younger self? Um, Many of you may not know, but I used to also play professionally a sport like shuttle badminton, and I played that at a competitive level, so both at a state level, at a national level when I was in high school. So now I think like one of the things I would tell my younger self is, because now I know that, right? Like those days, shuttle badminton was a non-glamorous sport. It was a lot of hard work. There wasn't so much of visibility. Like today, it is like one of the in sports. It's we have amazing brand ambassadors. You have like lots of league matches, and it's become like a global sport as well as a sport that a lot of Indians are aspiring to play. So on the lighter side, I would tell my younger self, probably I could continue to play the game for longer and maybe pursue that. Who knows, even professionally. But coming back more to the serious aspects of what would I tell myself, my younger self, more professionally, I think two things. One is I think now, like looking back, I think when you're earlier on in your career, when you're younger, you probably have lesser restrictions in terms of mobility, in terms of responsibilities. I would probably have liked to have experimented a little bit more in terms of maybe roles and locations and choices, specifically maybe locations. So I think I've had the privilege of working with different multinational organizations where I've had the benefit of doing some regional roles, interacting with colleagues across different cultures, and it teaches you a ton. While I've lived in different parts of India through my career, I've never really lived for a long period of time outside of India. So if I could change one thing, I think that's something I could change. So the theme is maybe experimenting more. It's easier before you have children, before you get married. So I think that's one probably insight for my younger self. I think the second one, and this is more true for women, right? Um, there is a lot of research available now on diversity and inclusion and how women are probably wired differently from men. I think when I dabbled into DNI, and this is probably halfway into my career, it was a big aha moment because till that point of time, I think like most women, my focus was if I work hard and do my work well, everything else will follow. I didn't really understand what either I could do or what these macroeconomic factors are around pursuing a career as you become senior. So I think these insights of how diversity inclusion plays out at work, how women are wired differently from men, and there are some things that we as women need to do as we advance our career. So the aspect of having a sponsor, owning your personal brand, or just I think those were like amazing sort of insights which I wish I had known early on into my career. So yeah, I think that would probably be some of the things I would tell myself if I was younger. I think so. Yes, absolutely. Yes. I would be a hypocrite to say that like failures are not our biggest teachers. I think a couple of things that I'd like to probably highlight here. One is more in terms of just the theory of the learning mindset, right? And we all are aware of how a person who exhibits a fixed mindset, who is not necessarily very open to new things, who probably thinks they know it all, versus someone who exhibits a growth mindset, which is all about, okay, I'm coming into a room, I'm coming into a meeting, I'm coming in here to learn, I'm flexible in my thinking, probably has a greater contribution to even outcomes and outputs. And a simple thing, like I remember when I was as part of this very interesting training that was done on fixed mindsets and growth mindsets, um, simple examples of children, right? And this stuck with me. If you ever ask a room full of adults and children to say, hey, can you just draw out this elephant that's pink and has spectacles? Like most of the adults, I think, including me, would say, like, have you gone crazy? Like, A, elephants are not pink, and B, elephants are not do not wear spectacles. But the children actually have a vivid imagination, and they're not curbed by this does not exist or this cannot happen. And it just exhibits so beautifully how their minds are equipped, and how they exhibit or role model that growth mindset. Similarly, if you think of failures as, oh my god, this is a failure, I have done something wrong, I think that's where we get it wrong, right? So my advice would be, including to myself, is if you are taking risks on one side, you're bound to make mistakes. You're bound to probably say, hey, this is not working out. And I think it's okay, because it's part of two sides of the same coin. You cannot take risks and at the same time say, I don't want to make mistakes. And I think that's then being in that sort of a fixed mindset. Because again, if I look at my younger son who learned to cycle a few years ago, he probably has fallen down umpteen number of times. He scraped his hand umpteen number of times, but he still wants to get onto that cycle, because that's how he wants to probably become even better at cycling as a topic. And that's as simple as what we are doing at our workplace. And I must say that, having worked for Uber in the past, this is where it's part of the DNA of companies like Uber of just experimenting. It's a culture of the ability to probably make mistakes, because that's when you're probably driving that culture of experimentation as well as entrepreneurship. So in my mind, as long as you're okay that you want to forge ahead, you want to try new things, there will be a few things that don't work, and you're focusing on moving ahead, or you're focusing on the solution and not so much on the problem, or not so much on, oh my god, why did I make this mistake? I think that's super critical. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to dissect it, to say, okay, what caused it, what were the root causes, and how should we fix it, versus saying, my god, I made this mistake, this cannot happen, or let me like do something like. So I think it's about that ethos of, it's okay, these are learning moments, and let's probably move on. So that's something I definitely want to practice myself. As I said, I've had the advantage of probably operating and working in that environment for the last couple of years. So I would highly recommend that. And the extent of, again, mistakes and failures is relative. I would probably stay away from using the word failure, and probably more, I would like to use the word learnings, right? Just learnings and experimentation as a more acceptable way of doing different things and trying different things without being afraid of failing. We do know and we do acknowledge that overall in STEM, at least for India, at least the data that I have seen, is that we're not gender balanced, right? Already to begin with. So it's not like we have 50-50% of our student population in colleges, or women employees working in different sort of companies with a STEM background. So I think we already have that issue. It's something that we're aware of. Now, in my mind, like if you look at the COVID impact, will that have a detrimental impact? I don't know. To be very honest, I'm not sure. And I'll tell you why. Has it disrupted education? Absolutely, yes. But at the same time, has it made accessibility a huge positive? Again, I think it's a huge yes, right? Because if you think of a lot of organizations in the past where location was a big constraint, okay, we have this role in Pune, but you know what? You're based in Mumbai. And in the past, it probably was not okay. Versus, I feel like today in the COVID times, we're living in a world where virtual working is only going to grow, is only going to increase. So I believe that there will be more opportunities for organizations to, again, provide such opportunities to people to work from remote locations. So location shouldn't really matter as long as the skill is probably relevant. Similarly, I do think where organizations are looking at the right sort of cost model, there may be an uptake in terms of just project-based work or gigs that are available. I know like many leading organizations have a lot of return to work sort of projects where you're giving second career women to come back and experiment and do a lot of interesting work, and eventually, if they like it, even probably rotate off into a permanent role. And I do think like that will continue or that will increase. So in my mind, I'm not an expert. I don't know the exact numbers of COVID having an implication on STEM. I think we already had a demand challenge. I think organizations as well as academia are kind of trying to look to say how do we increase that funnel, and it's more a continue item. But with COVID impacting some of these things in the ways we work, I feel women actually have better opportunities with more increased flexibility. So I would absolutely advocate for women to continue to pursue sort of STEM opportunities. Looking into that same crystal ball, if there was one, what does it mean for careers? What does it mean in terms of our ways of working? I think without a shred of doubt, there will be a change in probably employee expectations in terms of how organizations are structuring themselves, in terms of opportunities that are being available. And what I mean by that is we're moving to this world where virtual work is becoming increasingly more acceptable. So, career wise, like I said in the last segment, there will be more opportunities where people can continue to work flexible, can continue to work in different locations without necessarily being in the same sort of base location. So it's a positive. Um, I think organizations, again, as I said that in the last time as well, will look to say there's a big push for collaboration, right, across industries, and I think COVID has just taught us that. So if collaboration is as critical or even more critical, if we're all doing this sort of virtually in our homes, um, I think like that's again something that will probably push employees and organizations to say, how do we maintain productivity, right? How do we enable engagement in this newer ways of working, because collaboration is still super important. And I think as part of that, it's also about this whole concept, which is not new for tech firms, where you're looking at setting up agile teams. So I just feel like it's going to be more of what we've started doing, and it's probably the adoption rate or the coverage in organizations that's going to increase. So you will see more cross-functional teams, you will see more agile teams, because you are trying to drive more collaboration despite like COVID. And I think the last piece that we can't ignore is that there will be leaner teams, right? Like I think organizations will look at layers, just spans of control, to probably say what's the most effective way of operating in this probably new world. And last but not least, from a career standpoint, I know there's again been a lot more acceptance of people coming on board with career breaks, especially for women. I do think, irrespective of gender, whether male or whether female, integrated sort of work life is going to become a reality. So today we all talk about it, and now in India as well, which I don't think was the case pre-COVID. Like if you're on a serious conference call, you have a child popping up from here, you have a pet popping up from here, we're all singing together, looking at our computer screens. And tell me honestly, do you think this existed before March of 2020? I don't think so. I really don't think so. So, versus today, is it acceptable? Yes. Will it get even more acceptable in the future? I think so. So, this whole integration of work life, right, while we're all working virtual, is probably also going to have a big impact on just how people are looking at their careers. So yeah, I think that would probably be at a high level. Okay, so women in technology. What is my advice to this group of amazing, I would say, the women workforce? Firstly, I think every woman in technology is, I would say, privileged, right? Because this is probably one of the most exciting sectors to be associated with because of just the change and the transformation that this group is enabling across industries, across countries. So it's an exciting time to just be in technology. So I think that's amazing. So we should make the most of it. Um, the second thing is just how do you own your own journey? And this is true for in technology, outside of technology, for all women, including me, right? Like, how do we own our own journey? Like, I think it's okay to say we're making choices. We're making choices about roles. We're making choices about when we want to work, when we don't want to work, in terms of actually having flexible timings, also taking career breaks. So I think in the end, my advice would be that everything is okay, right? Like it completely depends on you as an individual, but make your choices and own your sort of career. And related to this, at least what's worked for me, and I've seen for a lot of women, especially operating in the socio cultural setup that we have in India, we need strong sponsors in our own personal ecosystem, whether it's supportive spouses, supportive children, supportive parents or parent-in-laws. But I do think like taking the family along just helps us in our own careers. So this is like preaching to the choir, and I know like all women would agree with me that that's an important part of ensuring that we're successful and we continue to pursue our own sort of aspirations. So again, that support system is super critical. And I think the last thing, being a senior leader, and this is an ask for all those people who've already invested in their own careers, have had tons of learning along the many years that they've been working, or even the few years that they've been working. How do you really lean in? How do you really make a difference to maybe another woman colleague who has either just started off their journey or is probably going through a current situation, has just had a child, has just gotten married? Any advice, any connect, any form of like, here's what you could do, here are some resources, any way of just leaning in and making that difference. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm your like appointed buddy or your appointed mentor. That will also be amazing, but I'm talking about informally leaning in just your circle of influence. It can be at work, it can be just people who want to, those bright young children who are trying to get into STEM. Like, how are we encouraging them? So I feel that women as leaders can be this huge influence on other colleagues as well as budding students who want to pursue this. So make the time. I know we're all extremely, extremely busy with managing home, managing our work front, but if you get that opportunity to touch someone's life in giving that advice of here's why STEM, or here's why tech, or here's how I enjoyed, please, please, please make that a priority of just leaning in and giving back to the women community as a whole. So in conclusion, I just want to again take the opportunity to thank each one of you to listen in and dial in. And I want to also reiterate the importance of this platform. I do think like this is absolutely an amazing platform for women in technology to come together, to learn from each other, to advocate for each other, as well as to grow together. So make the most of it. Do take the opportunity to reflect after you have had the experience to listen into multiple dialogues through the course of the event. And if there's any other way that I can help personally, I'm just a LinkedIn away, as they say. So take care and enjoy the rest of the conference.